A little while ago I looked at this, the Intel Acer BiFrost A770. Pretty good card. I was actually quite impressed with the price to performance, and a lot of people actually said on that video that Acer now do an RX 7600 as well, and if I could look at it. So I put in a little email and they kindly sent one out, so let's take a look. Acer is proud to present the Predator RX, the latest and greatest desktop, now in a small spaceship inspired form factor. Powered by the top of the line Intel i9 3900KS processor and NVIDIA RTX 40 series graphics, the Orion X is a compact powerhouse. From doing work, creative, animation, editing and gaming, this is sure to handle it with ease. You can also enjoy some of the latest and greatest games with 3 months of free Microsoft Game Pass included with this and any PC or laptop in the Acer Nitro or Predator range, featuring titles such as Starfield, Forza Motorsport, Minecraft Legends and many others. Visit the link down below to learn more. So big thank you to Acer for sending this over for me to look at. At the time of recording this, they're basically the same price, so it is a real one versus the other, which one's better kind of job. I will do a full video on one versus the other if people would like to see it, but for now we are going to be focusing on this card. So this is an 8GB model. We have a core clock of 2.3 GHz with a boost of 2.7. I will also quickly point out this is a rotated sample up until this point, so your packaging might vary a little bit. Now let's look at the card itself. A much more sleek and stealthy card than the Intel one. We had the kind of clear blade on the fan, and then this one's gone for a more stealthy black, and then they've covered up the gloss part that says Aeroblade 3D. Other little differences on the top, we have got a full flat cover, unlike the little dip that's on the Intel one. I wasn't really a fan of this to begin with, so I do like the all flat design. You can also see the power difference on the RX 7600. You've just got a single 8-pin PCI. This does take up to 180 watts, and they recommend using a 550 watt power supply. So nothing crazy, but again, this is a more budget end card, so that'll be why. In terms of the length of the card, this is a 270mm card, so fairly compact. Generally cards we are seeing getting bigger and bigger anyway, but for nowadays basically that is a smaller card on the market. As I mentioned with the art card, we have got a dual fan setup. We've got the Aeroblade one on the left hand side and then a standard one on the right. Another little difference there is we've got a more brushed style on the A770, and then on the RX 7600 it's more matte. It's much like the black edition of a Mercedes, is certainly more stealthy. Turning these over onto the back, so we've got some back plates on both of these cards. There are some similarities, but of course they are two different brands at the heart of the card, so there will be some differences there. I expect they could use the same blank for the back plate though, because it does look a fairly standard size. We've got the same kind of notch, but then obviously the inner sides are cut differently, so they might be able to use the same parts for some of it though. You can see the 4 heat pipes on the end there. The Intel card's actually more matte, and then we've got a more stainless heatsink on the 7600. Then the last thing to talk about, we've got our display options. On the 7600 we have 3 display ports. These are 1.4, and then we've got one HDMI which is 2.1. So obviously you have support for up to 4 monitors there, any resolution up to 8K, so 7680 by 4220. But we now need to get this into a system and see how it performs. Will that 8GB be a little bit of a limiting factor for this though? Let's find out. Okay, so into our first game, which is going to be Starfield. I am recording this with OBS, so it will reduce our frames by a little bit, maybe like 7 or 8 or so. So just keep that in mind. I do want to give you better quality for the video though, so that's why I'm recording with that. We're only going to be testing all of the cards in this video at 1440p high, which you might think is a little bit strange, especially as some of the titles are going to cripple this card. But the reason being is that you can go to any other video of a graphics card on my channel and then compare results really easily. Realistically, you'd probably turn this down to maybe low medium if you want to play 1440p, but I do test everything at high so you can easily compare to other cards. I'm going to use part of the intro for this, so just if you want to stay spoiler free, just skip past. Now I'm actually pretty impressed so far. We are at 40 frames, which admittedly is lower than the console frame rate, but this is a budget graphics card, and considering we're on high settings, I'm actually pretty impressed already. Like I said earlier, realistically you'd probably run this card at low or medium, but considering this is all at high, we're getting a very stable 42 to 45 frames, so actually doing very good considering. And we're also recording with OBS as well, so there's multiple things going on, and it seems to be holding up very well, so pretty impressed for our first game. It's a very surprising first result there, from around 42 to 45, really consistent frame rate with OBS recording as well, so Really impressed there straight off the bat. Starfield's been a really hard game to run anyway, so I'm impressed with the result for the 7600 there. So then let's move on to our next game and see what we get for that one. On to Cyberpunk. This is currently running the high default preset with FSR turned off. I just wanted to see what it would run without it to begin with. And we are sat at 56, 57 frames, so pretty good straight out of the box. Now let's turn the FSR on. Let's go to balanced, 87. So gives us about another half, maybe another 60% for the frames. So 80 frames with FSR and a high setting on Cyberpunk, pretty good there. Now let's go on to our next game. So on to Dirt 5, we're going to use the inbuilt benchmark for this one. Everything is set to high again. Then the benchmark keeps things nice and consistent. So let's see what we get for this one. An average of 78.9, that's a lot higher than I was expecting. I think it's actually higher than the ARC was as well. Also, especially as we've got 8 GB of memory in this over the 16 in the ARC. Maximum of 200 frames. I'm really impressed with this so far. Apex Legends, as you can see, everything is set to a high preset again. And then I go into the firing range for this one because I do get the penalty if I leave games early. So this is the best way to do this without getting penalties all the time. So I'm now doing this voiceover style like it's early 2010 YouTube, but I didn't actually have the audio for the rest of this for some reason. So I'm just jumping into Apex, and as you can see, I'm doing more like a little preset run that I've done just to get very consistent results. As you can see in the top left, we have got between 110 to 140 frames. Minus the little drop in frames as we're going down the ramp, obviously loading everything in. We did see some very good results, even with the textures right up in our face. It was still giving a very consistent result. So very good job for Apex. Now we'll go on to Crisis Remastered. This was the only scenario where I heard any coil whines from this card, but it was literally just in the video card setting menu, so nothing to worry about when you're actually using it. A little bit strange that it only pops up during that setting, but thankfully I didn't hear any more during the testing. So high preset for Crisis, we've got ray tracing off, and then we've got no motion blur again because it's trash. There are a couple of times where the frame rate does dip, for example where the house is collapsing or I get killed, but otherwise I did see a fairly consistent frame rate, around 60 to 80 frames. So last but not least, the old trusty Far Cry 6, using the built-in benchmark for nice consistent results. Again, everything's set to high. Doing this voiceover style actually gives me the chance to physically speak about what you're about to see on the screen, which is a low VRAM error. This is the first time that I saw a VRAM error with all the testing I did in this card, so it's going to be a very rare instance that it pops up. Far Cry gave us an average of 76 frames a second, which I think is pretty good. It was a lot higher than I was expecting, to be honest, as well. But now we're going to the conclusion. I'll give you my overall thoughts. As you saw from the results in the benchmarks, did very well for performance, a lot better than I was expecting. Certainly did have some higher frames of the ARC card as well, which I was surprised at. The 8 GB of memory isn't really too much of a limiting factor. The only effect that I saw from it was in Far Cry. It did have a little bit of a dip, but Far Cry is pretty intensive for video memory, so that will be why. I'd just say to check the games that you're going to be playing before you buy one if you are looking to get one of these cards. Also quickly to touch on, I did test all those games in 1440p high. If you do want to run them at 1080, you could expect maybe 20% improvement over the results that you saw in the video. I am going to do a budget build with this card I have got planned, which will focus on 1080p high, ultra kind of presets. So if you want to see more 1080 content, then just get subscribed, ding the bell, because that video will be up fairly soon. I'm just waiting on a few parts to get that build started. I also did test 3D Mark Time Spy as well, which you can download yourself. There is a free demo available on Steam, so you can compare to the results that I've got on the screen that you can see now. Temperature wise for this card, we saw a high of 77. The room was very cold, 12.7 at the time I did the benchmarks, and then that's a delta of 64.3. So very cool in terms of the card. Even if the room was warmer, higher temperatures than that are fine anyway. These cards are built to run hot anyway, so there's no real worries there. The fans are quite loud. It's like the ARC card, it was very much quiet or loud. There's no real in between. If you go onto the software now, you can see we've got some different options for power mode. So we've got the silent, default, turbo, and then the user mode, which is custom control. You can do the power limit and things like that. And then the fan speed, you can do a manual control. As you can tell, it is very loud when it's ramped up. So as you can see, quite noisy when they do ramp up. They're just very small, so they do make a lot of noise, but thankfully it doesn't ramp up to the maximum like that very often. Other little things to talk about on the software, we have got some monitoring options, so you can see all of your clocks and speeds and all that kind of business. You've got some options for an on-screen display, so you get some stats on the top right hand corner. You can obviously change where you position that if you'd like to. and then you've just got the settings page. No RGB control for this one. Unlike we saw with the A770, you've just got the Predator blue logo that lights up, and that's all you've got in terms of lighting on this card. Like I said, we've got the build coming up for the 1080p. It's going to be a budget build, so stay tuned if you want to see a bit more 1080p focus. And since recording this, Acer have now announced that they've got the RX 7600 XT in a Nitro edition. There's also the 7700 XT, 7800 XT, and you know that I've already asked to look at them, so as and when they're available, we'll be covering those, which I'm looking forward to. If they're all available at the same time, doing like an overview of all of them would be pretty cool. So let me know if you'd like to see that, and I'll see what I can do. But any more questions, do let me know in the comments box. I will add the link for this in the description if you want to pick one up. Big thank you to Acer for sending it out for me to look at. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.